Hey folks, we have lived through 6+ months of 2023 so far, so apparently that means I need to be checking in on the best books I have read so far this year. As always, I will feature only books that are published by independent publishers here. That's not all the books I read, but it is the books that I want to highlight the most here on this channel. So everything you see here is published by an independent publisher, either in the US or in Canada or in the UK, and they are in no particular order. That's not true. They are in height order because that is how I've stacked them for the thumbnail. All right, starting at the bottom of the stack for no particular reason other than it makes it more difficult for me to grab the book. We have Brazil Maru, and this is by Karen Tay Yamashita, and it's published by Coffee House Press. I've read a couple of her books this year and I've really been enjoying them. This novel is about a group of Japanese immigrants who move to a remote region of Brazil, and it starts in 1925 when a small group arrives on a ship called the Brazil Maru, and they make their way to this farming area and they set up their lives. It features 4 different perspectives of people who live in this, it's like a commune, I guess. They live in this farm, and they really dream of creating a new world, new lives for themselves where they can support each other through their farming and really live off the land. And it's a beautiful, beautiful novel. A lot of it is about power and money and the abuse of power and the issues with idealism, and there's a lot of baseball and family dynamics, and it's really fantastic. The narrative style is really interesting. It's kind of, it feels kind of distanced, even though it's told by these 4 different narrators, and at times the narrators seem to know things that, like, you wonder, like, how does this one person know those details of that other person's life? But I don't know, that just added to the story. It's definitely a multi-generational tale, and it's deeply sad in moments, but also has a lot of humor to it. Also from Coffee House Press, I read In the Distance by Hernan Diaz, who wrote Trust, which co-won the Pulitzer Prize this year. I love this so much. So this is the story of Hauken. I think I'm saying his name right. That's like kind of a perpetual thing in the book that people don't know how to pronounce his name. Hauken was born in Sweden and lived there with his father and brother, and they're really struggling to make ends meet. And so the father sends both of his boys to America to find, better prospects. And Hauken is a young boy, and when he gets to where they're supposed to get on the ship to sail to America, he gets separated from his brother, and he ends up getting on a ship that goes to San Francisco, and his brother presumably gets on a ship that goes to New York. And we follow Hauken on his journey to San Francisco, where he's super confused. He doesn't know the language, and he thinks that he can walk from San Francisco to New York. And so this novel is his journey of trying to get to his brother and all of the, violent, crazy things that happen to him along the way. So this is obviously set, I feel like it's gold rush time because there's gold rush elements to it. Super amazing. This was a finalist for the Pulitzer as well. Great book. I also read The Consequences, which is short stories by Manuel Munoz. These are so beautiful. As with all short story collections, there are some stories that I loved more than others. The first 2 stories and then the last story in particular were my favorites. The first 2 by far were my favorites. These take place mostly in small towns around Fresno, California. A lot of them feature immigrants from Mexico, Mexican Americans, farm workers. There's a lot of stories about family connections, about love, about loss. The people and the places in these stories are so beautifully depicted. I just thought this was incredible. This was published by Grey Wolf. I just have a lot of luck with Grey Wolf's short story collections. So This was fantastic. Highly recommend it. I also love the cover. It's beautiful. It's like one of those feels like gel. Even though the texture is very pleasing. Oh my gosh, I have another great. I tried to change up the publishers that I was featuring here. And that obviously didn't work. Dr. No by Percival Everett. This novel is so funny. It is different. It is not satisfying in the way that these two novels are satisfy that deep storytelling, emotional, depth of characters like these two do. But it is so, I was laughing, I just giggling because for one reason and one reason only actually. This is the story of Walla Kitu, and Walla is a mathematician who studies nothing. That is his area of study, nothing. And he is hired by a supervillain who wants to also harness the power of nothing because he wants to basically destroy the world, I guess. Turn the world into nothing. So it's just filled with hilarious sentences about nothing. Nothing is funny in this book. Nothing is really funny in this book. So just listen to this. So this is Walla recounting the story of two generals. So the U.S. Army is really interested in his work as well. So everyone wants to harness the power of nothing. And so this is when these two generals come to visit Walla. We discussed nothing in a roundabout yet truthful way for just more than 2 hours. They wouldn't tell me what they wanted it for, and I couldn't tell them what it was or where to find it. What do you think you can do with nothing if you find it? That's why we're talking to you, said General He. We'd very much like to know, You know nothing, said General She. That is widely accepted. We want your help. Don't you want to serve our country? I've given this country nothing my entire life. I don't plan to change now. It's just filled with these hilarious sentences about nothing. Then at one point he goes with some other characters and he goes, I went with them. I had nothing to lose. I also read and loved The Wall by Marlon Haushofer. This is published by New Directions and it's translated by Sean Whiteside. This novel was first published in 1963 and it's about a woman who is visiting friends in the Austrian Alps, and she awakens one morning and her friends haven't returned from dinner in the nearby town. She goes to find them and discovers that an invisible wall has cut her off from the rest of the world. And so she's imprisoned on this mountainside in these woods with only a dog, a cat, and a cow for companions. And yeah, she's pretty sure that the rest of humanity has been destroyed by some sort of weapon or supernatural force, and she has to survive on her own with these animals. And it's bizarre and it's amazing. And I loved it, and you should read it. From New Vessel Press is Pollocks Arm by Hans van Trotha, and this is translated by Elizabeth Laufer. And this is a super powerful short novel that was nominated for the Republic of Consciousness Prize, the first U.S. version of that prize. It's really beautiful. It's the story of a real-life historical figure named Ludwig Pollack, and he was a very well-known cataloger of antiquity, and he was most famous for finding the arm of a very famous sculpture, the Laocoon, pictured here. So that's what he was most famous for during his life. He and his family lived in Rome during World War II, and they were Jewish, and they were murdered by the Nazis during World War II. They were captured and put on a train, and they were sent to Auschwitz, where all record of them has been lost. So it's assumed that they died. So that's all truth. That really happened. Also, truth, what really happened, the Vatican sent an emissary to Pollocks' home the night before or shortly before the family was rounded up by the Nazis, and the Vatican offered Pollack and his family refuge within the walls of the Vatican to save them. And we don't know what actually transpired that night. We just know that he and his family did not go to the Vatican. And so this is the story. It's told by that emissary of the night that he went to Pollack's home and is desperately trying to save him and convince him to come to the Vatican. And all Pollack wants to do is talk about history, talk about his life, and just reminisce and talk about literature. Yeah, it's beautiful. Another book that I highly recommend. My pile has fallen over, so we are no longer in height order. I also read and loved Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tokarczuk, and this is translated by Antonia Lloyd-Jones. This edition is published by Fitzcarraldo Editions. I don't know who it's published by in the US, but this is the UK published novel. This is the story of Janina, who lives in the mountainous forested region of Poland, and there is a string of murders happening in this forest, mostly people involved with hunting. It's a big hunting region. A lot of people are really involved in hunting, and people start to turn up dead. And Janina is this cranky old woman who lives alone and is really, really into astrology and has just this really unique and wonderful voice. And she's trying to help the town figure out who is killing these people. I think one of the things that made me love this book the most is that we had a family book club where my parents and my grandparents and my brother and his fiance, we all read this book, and we came together and ate Polish food, and it was really sweet and beautiful, and that was part of the whole experience of reading and loving this novel. And apologies to my other brother who didn't get invited. So the last two books I have here are partially the reason this video is going up kind of late and past the mid-year, because when I was getting ready to talk about my favorite books of the year so far, I was in the middle of these two books, and they were so good. I was like, I cannot film this until I'm done with these books, so I can include them. First up is a memoir. It's called Strip. It's by Hannah Sward, and it's published by Tortoise Books, which is a Chicago-based small publisher. And this is the story of Hannah's whole life from childhood on. It's the story of her journey becoming a writer, really at the core. That's kind of the arc of the memoir. But Hannah had a really rough, painful life. It starts when she's a young child, and it's really beautiful. The way, I think it starts when maybe she's around 4 years old, and the language that she uses in the beginning is very, very, very simple, as if it is being narrated by a young child. That's kind of important because it narrates some extremely painful and traumatic events in her childhood. She was the victim of abuse, sexual assault as a young child. Her parents separated and moved apart when she was a child. And there's a lot of pain in those, not just the early years, throughout. So it's the story of her childhood and then her adolescence. We see her with both her father, who was a poet, and with her mother, who's moved to Florida and is a real character too. We see her relationships with her two half-siblings, especially her sister. At some point she moves to Chicago. She really wants to be an actor, and so she's trying to save up money to become an actor, to go to acting school, but the job she ends up in is prostitution. She is then eventually also ends up becoming a stripper, and she's earning money stripping, and in order to lose weight, her and her sister try meth, so she becomes addicted to meth. It's a journey. It is so beautiful. Her writing is so beautiful. The places in particular, her homes with, she moved around a lot and she was with her father, her stepmother, and then her home in Florida is just so beautifully depicted. The relationships, both long-term, deep relationships with her family, but also fleeting relationships that kind of come and go out of her life. Like, people are just described so vividly and so wonderfully in this memoir. I don't pick up memoirs often. This was recommended to me by the publisher, and I am so glad I got it because it was stunning. It was so good. I really recommend giving this a shot. And then last but not least, we have I keep wanting to say At the Edge of the Forest. This is At the Edge of the Woods. It's by Catherine Bromwich. It's published by $2 Radio, which is a publisher who is based in Columbus, Ohio. This is a beautiful book. It inspired me to make a zucchini and goat cheese tart that I found online, because that is a food that is mentioned in this book. There's a lot of really delicious sounding food that is mentioned in this book. But that's all I'm going to say, because I have a whole other video all about this book that I have already published. So if you are interested, click here, wherever, and check out that video so you can learn more about this amazing novel. My name is Sarah. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.